Hey everybody, what's good, Classic City? Welcome to another episode of AthCast. I am your host, Matt Pulver, joined by Chris Dowd of Athens Politics Nerd, Blake Aued of Flagpole. We're talking politics, we're talking elections. Let's get this thing popping. It's election season in Athens-Clarke County, Georgia. We go to the polls on May 21st to decide how we want our local government to look. Every 2 years, half of the county commission is up for election. This year, it's the even-numbered districts, and 3 of those races are contested. Plus, we have the sheriff's race, as well as the Democratic primary to determine who runs against Republican Congressman Mike Collins in November. We will also, at the end, talk about local transit, specifically the decision whether or not to bring back fares for the Athens bus, which is currently free. It's currently fare-free, and the decision on whether or not to bring back fares splits the commission right now. I will link to a really good breakdown of all that on Athens Politics Nerd in the show description, along with election-related articles from both Blake Aued and Chris Dowd. Okay, enough from me. Let's see how Blake and Chris are seeing this local election season. So let's start by setting the scene. 2024 is going to be an election year like no other. It's already been pretty crazy, and we're just in March. And some of that craziness that we've seen at the national level and in the national media has already made its way here to us in Little Athens, especially in the wake of the Lake and Riley murder. So how do we anticipate election season playing out? Blake, you wrote in Flagpole that Clarke County Commission could take another sharp turn to the right in the May 21st election. So before we get to the individual races, let's start by, like I said, sort of setting the scene. What's at stake?
Well, the commissioners who are being challenged are 2 of the remaining progressive commissioners, I think, on the commission, and Jesse Houle, who's probably the most furthest to the left out of all the folks who are remaining after the purge of 2022. And Houston Gaines redrew all the commission district lines, are the ones who are being challenged. And so if the challengers win, I mean, I think by definition, that's going to push the commission further to the right. I mean, you could wind up with a commission that is made up of a majority of members, I think, who have Republican backing, even if they're not Republicans themselves. And the local Republicans do have a slate of candidates that they're backing in these races.
And this is the clean and safe sort of group of PACs, and the PACs have expanded as well. I think there was one that issued a video against Deborah Gonzalez the other day.
Yeah, I think Safer Georgia or Safer Georgians Incorporated. It's I don't know much about them. They list their address as a P.O. box here in Athens, but
yeah, Eric Eberhard is behind that, I believe, who's a attorney in the area.
Okay, so sounds like it's a lot of Republican money is going to be coming into Athens, which is kind of amazing to me. And these candidates have been on Fox News. Carol Myers Challenger was on Fox News the other day. So that's, the conservative media is definitely taking an interest in Athens.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure that if I were running for county commission in Athens, Georgia, that I would go on Fox News. I'm not sure that's really advantageous, but Sydney Waters, Mama Sid of pizza fame, did go on Fox News with one of her supporters, James De Paola, the grilled cheese guy, who is one of the folks who heckled Kelly Gertz at his press conference on public safety a few weeks ago. And then, of course, people unearthed that several years ago he had been arrested in a domestic dispute where apparently he threatened his wife because she put too much cheese on his grilled cheese. So those are the kind of folks that we're talking about here, who are kind of coalescing around these conservative candidates.
And that guy was like proudly displayed in the background while Sydney Waters was giving her interview on Fox News, which is like
Right.
I don't know if I'd want to be associated with that guy. I don't know.
Yeah.
And he himself was on Fox News talking about how how much he hates Kelly Gertz
And cheese.
They interviewed him under the name of James Lee, which apparently I believe is his middle name. But of course they didn't mention his past or the fact that he's a street preacher downtown who, those street preachers who just kind of go around harassing people and especially college students. So, and he's now trying to get the mayor and commission recalled. He was out at the library just the other day, I was told, collecting signatures for a recall petition, which is not going to happen because I think you need like 20-something thousand signatures. I think it's like 30% of registered voters or something like that.
Yeah, there's no way.
It's an insane amount of signatures. Yeah. Like there's just no way it's going to happen.
Even if people were legitimately unhappy with Kelly Gertz, which I don't even think is true, that would still be extremely challenging, I would say.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the vast majority of people in Athens think that Kelly's handled this whole situation with a lot of grace.
Professionalism. Yeah. How do you just, not fly off the handle when you're confronted by that?
I don't know. But, I guess, it was like he said at that press conference, I taught high school for a long time and, I'm used to dealing with people acting out, I guess, and some of them behave better than you are.
He had some subtle shots.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with the District 2 race for commissioner. We have multi-term progressive incumbent Melissa Link facing a challenger from her right in Jason Jacobs, local business owner and former professional baseball player. So, Chris, what jumps out to you about this race?
Well, I don't know much about Jacobs, but I know about Melissa. I know that she has been getting more and more people have been a little unhappy with her, I would say, over the years. She's definitely made some enemies with some of her comments that she's sort of blurting things out at work sessions that no one's really paying attention to, but then it blows up at the comment about, UGA football players raping and murdering, which I think people are kind of right to be upset about, because she's painting with a very broad brush there. But I don't know how much that's going to hurt her, especially because she's running against someone who has voted Republican consistently in the past. So I don't know much about him, but just based on that alone, I don't think this district is going to go for him.
Have you looked up his voting record?
Okay.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. And he actually just sent out a press release today as we're taping this morning, and so he's sounds like he's going to be talking a lot about homelessness. He's going to be talking a lot about housing costs, and I think these are big issues. So I mean, he may be able to get some traction, but as Chris mentioned, I mean, if he's running to Melissa's right and he's coming at this from a Republican point of view, I don't think that's going to fly because we're talking about District 2. That is the most Democratic, left-leaning district out of all the commission districts. So regardless of, I think, any qualms or concerns people might have about Melissa, and it is a weakness, but it's also a strength of hers, I think, that, she tends to speak her mind.
Yeah, I like someone who's outspoken, for sure.
She puts her foot in her mouth on occasion doing that, but also, she's very well versed on policy. I think there are some people who are actually frustrated with her policy stances on some things, especially regarding infill development and transportation issues, parking, where she's a little more reactionary, maybe. I don't know. She hasn't been quite as strong in terms of more modern urban policy type of issues, if that makes any sense. Not so much the emphasis on protecting neighborhoods and people complaining about there not being enough parking, but kind of recognizing that we're in a housing crisis and we need more development. We need more development in town where the infrastructure is, and that doesn't necessarily have to involve cars. We need to move away from that kind of thing.
And I think she knows that and she agrees with that even. But then like when people call her up on the phone, she's like very sensitive to her constituents' concerns. And even if those concerns are like parking and things that I don't really care about.
Yeah, I mean, in the short term, for sure. Yeah. I guess I'm thinking more long term, about climate change and things of that nature. And of course, the explosion of housing costs, especially in town. When you take parking out of the equation, that brings it down a little bit.
Yeah. So she's been really defending like parking spaces and stuff, which I don't really understand.
But she's been defending parking places in her district, right? Like we're referring to like the Barber Street debacle and other stuff where, everybody's got a little bit or a lot of NIMBYism in them. Certainly probably people who have spent a lot of money on a house in District 2. And so in this race, it could very well be that that's to her benefit, that she's been seen to go to bat for homeowners in her district.
True.
I'm not saying that's a good thing, because we do have to be transitioning to a different way to organize our cities, but nobody's going to be too stressed about climate change on May 21st.
Well, I mean, I think if you're a homeowner, you may be correct. I think if you're a renter, I'm not so sure. Because renting is really where you've seen rents double, triple in the past few years. And so I think if you're a renter, maybe your perspective is a little bit different than if you're a homeowner trying to like protect their property values.
Let's turn to this Jacobs fella that we don't know a whole lot about. He was on the Athens Homeless Coalition. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
I saw one of y'all report that.
He resigned.
Yes.
To run for the seat.
So, and he's going to make homelessness central to his campaign, it sounds like. So do we have an idea of what that will look like?
Well, he was at the meeting when this was all, they're all voting on the plan to reduce homelessness, and he was speaking against that plan. I guess he thinks that he has a better way of doing it, or I think he was concerned that if you spend money on helping homeless people, you'll just get more homeless people. I think it was that kind of concern.
Okay, all right.
And I'm not sure how founded that is. We hear a lot about that idea that Athens has become like a haven for the homeless because we have all these services here. And Chris, you've done some reporting on that. And I mean, you basically found that, if I remember correctly, that a lot of that had to do with the fact that this is where the hospital is. And so
right.
People were getting brought here and dropped off, but they were getting dropped off at the hospital. And then, of course, they don't have anywhere to go back to. So that was really one of the draws.
We are a hub for services. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But a lot of those services are legitimate, like healthcare services.
Right. Well, I think we're also just a city. We are the urban center for this whole swath of Georgia.
Right.
And in the same way that unhoused folks in the vicinity of Atlanta will be attracted to Atlanta. I had a good friend of mine that I grew up with who fell into homelessness, and he went to Atlanta because he was in, where was he? In Auburn, out in Barrow County. And it's hard to be homeless in the woods without much sort of civilization around you. Mm-hmm. It's a whole lot easier in a city. So anybody would drift toward a city, and we just happen to be the city.
Yeah, and these hospitals need a place to discharge someone to. They can't just discharge a patient to the street,
right?
And so they have to go to a homeless provider, and we have them here in Athens, and they don't have them in some other counties. So that's why people kind of end up being dropped off here, sometimes against their will, which I definitely don't agree with. But so they need to work this out a little better. But it does make sense that you can't just okay, bye, and we'll drop you off on the corner.
When people make the case, make the strongest case, they say that other counties, other municipalities are intentionally busing people essentially to Clarke County to get them out of Elbert County or wherever. And they say, well, we should, bill them or whatever. And if there was a way to do that, if that was happening and there was a way to, bill Elbert County for making us be the stewards of these people. Yeah. But that's not possible. So I don't know what to do about that. Let's move to the commission race for District 6. We have Commissioner Houle will finish out their term, but will otherwise say goodbye to the game. And so we have Stephanie Johnson squaring off against Rashi Malcolm. So what are y'all looking at? Blake, what are you looking at in this race?
I'll give you a preview. I interviewed Jesse for an article that's going to be in the next Flagpole, and Jesse's not endorsing Rashi, but he made it clear that they think Rashi is by far the better choice in the race. Rashi is not a political person. She's not. Not even Jesse is sure how much they would actually agree on politics, but Rashi is someone who has done a lot of good in the community. Is an entrepreneur, has organized a couple of nonprofits related to food and access to food in the community, and helping food truck owners by providing sort of a central commercial kitchen for them to use, which is very expensive and kind of a barrier to starting a small business. Has served on the Industrial Development Authority, knows about economic development.
Yeah, she's the chair of the Industrial Development Authority.
Active in the Chamber of Commerce. So Jesse told me that they feel very confident that, this is at the very least a good-hearted person who cares about the community and will try to do the right thing. Stephanie Johnson is under the name Stephanie Maddox. She has got married and changed her last name, but Stephanie Maddox was the internal auditor at Athens-Clarke County for about 5 or 6 years, and wound up getting fired a couple of years ago, which was a pretty big story at the time. That's a very rare thing to happen for a charter officer to be fired in the middle of their term. But there was a internal investigation, a report that the county had done, hired an outside counsel to investigate some of the things that were going on in the auditor's office, and alleged that she was, not showing up for work, kind of was working weird hours, vanishing for long stretches of time where nobody could get in touch with her. A lot of turnover in the office. At one point, I think all 3 of her employees had quit, and she just never hired replacements. Went about 2 years without even producing an audit, I think, for the last 2 years of her tenure.
Yeah, she never completed her 2019 work plan.
In 2021.
Yeah, she put some of those out in 2021, but they weren't completely finished when she was fired.
So I really have to wonder, and she sued the county, and Mayor Gertz and the county manager Blaine Williams in federal court filed a discrimination lawsuit, and it's
still ongoing, which is just wild.
It's still ongoing, yeah. So I mean, you got to wonder how much of this is just sour grapes, obviously has a bone to pick with the mayor and the manager, and if elected would be in a position where she would help decide the fate of the manager. Would be one of 10 votes on whether to keep Blaine Williams on. So I think that's a strange position to be in.
Yeah, why would you want to join a body that just fired you? And a lot of those people are still on it. This wasn't just progressives or whatever. This was like a bipartisan.
It was an
kind
8-0 vote.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there were 2 commissioners that weren't there, but it was an 8-0 vote of the 8 that were there. And 5 of them are still on the commission, I believe.
Right. So that has to be super awkward if she were to be elected.
Well, now, in her defense, though, nothing about how she's presented herself in her campaign so far has had any of those sort of sour grapes, like you said, any sort of animosity toward the mayor and commission, manager Williams, etc.
And that's true, but I still think that this is really lurking in the background. It's definitely something to keep in mind.
I agree.
When you're in the voting booth.
Yeah, it's been hard for me because I never got clarity during that whole debacle. There was a lot of noise. And it was always hard for me to get to the bottom of what actually happened. Because I will say it is hard for me seeing her now enter the race. She's very poised and prepared. And it's hard for me. I mean, she's very impressive. So it's hard for me to square that with the story that she was someone who didn't do her job for whole spans of time.
Without getting into it too much, because there's probably not too much I can say really, but she was going through some things, and I mean, understandable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was COVID. It was,
we were all,
I think she took some family medical evac time at one point, and again, like, I don't think I can, even if I could recall the details, I'd probably be out of order even, discussing it. But, I mean, she was having some issues. So, I mean, I think that was probably part of it. But, I mean, you're right. She is a very poised, I think she's a intelligent woman, very poised, like you said, comes off well.
Extremely well.
So
I've never not been
right about that.
Yeah. I mean, I've never not been impressed with her when she speaks. I think me and her would disagree on a number of things, but just from a competency perspective, she seems like she's ready to step into that seat day one and hit the ground running.
I don't know how she's going to be able to work with the people who are there now, especially the manager,
It'll be chippy, maybe.
I just don't think that relationship is after suing with basically, there was nothing to the lawsuit. I mean,
it basically amounted to, well, Blaine yelled at me and Kelly told me to shut up. And I think we should point out that she was told about this twice. There were two separate occasions where she was formally put on notice before she was fired. So, and the investigation that was done determined that it was most likely that, she was angling for a pay raise for herself. At first her excuse was she was looking into it for her employees because she thought her employees were underpaid. But I mean, I think it was really actually, she thought that she was underpaid, and that's why she wanted all this this study. But and the side issue was where Blaine was just saying, you work for the government, you're the auditor, you can have access to anything you want. Why are you filing open records requests for this stuff? You can just go look at it,
And the open records request, I think
is a valid point.
Yeah, and they're open. Like, have you looked at what she was asking for? Like, it was an enormous request.
It was a bunch of stuff.
It would have taken weeks for them to do, like the HR department. So Blaine Williams is like, look, we don't have time to do this for you. We can get you the documents, but we don't want to have to dot every I and cross every T like you do on an open records request where there's legal liability there. Informally, we can get this to you much easier.
And this wasn't for an assignment either. I mean, she was acting on her own. And the way it works in Athens-Clarke County with this position is that the auditor works at the direction of the mayor and commission. And there's an audit committee that instructs the auditor on what they're supposed to be auditing. The auditor does not just sort of do whatever they want to. They're given direction into what they're supposed to be looking into. And that was not part of it, what she was supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and about the pay raises stuff, people who have disciplinary actions on their record, active discipline, you don't get raises, performance raises. Why is this a thing?
One thing that Stephanie is pointing out is from her campaign announcement. I mean, it seems like she's talking a lot about transparency. She's talking a lot about people don't know what's going on. And I mean, I do think that's a message that's going to resonate with voters, because I hear that a lot from people these days, is that, they just don't know what the government is doing. And I mean, I do think we have a transparent government, but there's some disconnect between, what the government is doing and people's ability to, I guess, access information about it somehow. And I'm not quite sure what it is, but there's a lot of disillusionment out there right now with the government. I think it's on both sides of the political aisle, the left and the right. And it probably is partially our fault. Somehow we're not delivering the information in a way that people are seeing it and digesting it, because people just don't seem to be very well informed these days, and they seem to not trust the local government, and that's a problem.
Oh, that brings us to District 8, where we have Mama Sid challenging sitting Commissioner Carol Myers. And Mama Sid Waters went on Fox and Friends, like you said earlier, Chris. And that was one of her complaints, right? Was that there's no transparency in local government, because she doesn't know that, the county passed.
Well, and if it's one thing if you're just a normal person living your life and you probably don't have time to follow the minutia of what's going on in local government, and I don't blame anybody for that. But if you're running for office and you are openly admitting on national television that, hey, I've been paying no attention to anything that's been going on the past 5 years. And then when I found out about it, I was shocked. That's kind of scary to me. That you're just saying, I don't know anything about anything. And so that's why I decided to run. And when we talk about there's a disconnect, but this stuff is not happening in secret. This resolution that everybody got so hot about, a couple months ago. It was voted on and signed on television, right? It's on the county's YouTube channel right now. It was in the paper. I'm sure it was in all the papers. We got 3 newspapers. We got 2 radio stations. We got Chris's website. We got this podcast.
We've got a podcast.
There's just no shortage of places that you can go to find out what's going on in your government. And
Google is open 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And what she was complaining about was the resolution in support of the Hispanic community. And yeah, I think you wrote about that. I made a video on it. I think that Banner Herald reported on it. Yeah. What else can we do to get this information out?
I don't know, but and it was not a controversial thing at the time. If I recall, it was a unanimous vote.
Yeah.
I don't remember anybody speaking out against it.
No. It was after the El Paso shooting, and just people were really scared. Yeah. Trump had been elected. The climate was just scary at that point. And to me, it was a really wonderful ceremony where we had a bunch of undocumented people down at City Hall who had never been there, and they're interacting with their government and really feeling welcomed. And I thought it was wonderful. And the fact that everyone is so upset about it now, it's heartbreaking.
And it's not even, and it was a gesture.
Right.
It was a gesture. It was a nice gesture. I think it was a comforting gesture for a lot of people, but it was a gesture. It wasn't a law.
No, there's nothing actionable.
No.
It's a bunch of
there's
whereas.
No policy.
Yeah.
It's just words.
There was one policy. It wasn't in the resolution, but at the same time, the police department decided not to arrest people who were driving without a license. So there is a policy behind it. If they have a passport, from a foreign country, they won't arrest that person.
They would just be cited.
I believe so. Yeah, something like that. They're not going to jail. They're allowed to go home. Yeah.
But again, that does not a sanctuary city make. That's
right.
That is a very teeny tiny little policy.
Right. Just for completeness sake, I want to mention that.
Sure. Yeah. Does Mama Sid have any chance? I don't know that district in terms of ideological breakdown.
Probably
not terribly liberal.
It's probably middle of the road. That's the lines have changed so much. It's hard for me to even remember. But that's a big chunk of the east side, and I think maybe now a little bit of it moved inward a little bit, so it might even be a little bit of 5 points maybe now.
It could.
It's majority Democratic.
Basically,
though.
The east side. It's definitely majority Democrat, and if I know Carol Myers, she's going to put in the work. And she's been a very conscientious commissioner. Mm-hmm. She does lean to the left, but she's very thoughtful. She's very well prepared, and she will definitely do the work that it takes, I think, to ensure that she gets reelected. So I don't have a lot of doubt that she's probably going to pull that one out.
Yeah, she's one of the few people who reads everything.
Mm-hmm.
She always does her homework. Yeah, she's the favorite for sure.
Yeah, and I think Mama Sid. Are we going to call her Mama Sid or Sydney Waters?
I think people probably know her as Mama Sid.
But Mama Sid is not just she's not some Mitt Romney type Republican. It appears more of a MAGA type Republican. I just think the race is interesting because it's the most ideologically disparate that we'll see this year.
Well, I mean, certainly if you're running for office and you're like, the main thing you're going to be talking about is the border. I mean, yeah, I think it's probably fair. I'm not really sure locally what we're supposed to be doing about the border, for or against, any more than I know what we're supposed to be doing about Palestine. But, it is what it is. If that's what somebody wants to talk about, then
and these people
being a local issue, but
want to deport everyone. Like at least that's what Too Cheesy guy was saying, and he was right behind her. So
again, this is just people not understanding just like how things work. I mean, if you're just now coming out of the woodwork and waking up and paying attention to commission meetings for the first time, you probably don't understand that. Cops don't even have access to this stuff. When they stop somebody, they don't know whether somebody's here illegally or not, and there's really no way for them to find out. That happens when you get booked into jail. That's when you get run through the system, right? And we've been deliberately trying here in this community for years to lock up fewer people. So, and for good reason, because it costs a lot of money, and we lock up people for a lot of things that you probably don't really deserve to get locked up for. Mm-hmm. So we're moving more towards just citing people and telling them to show up in court. And sometimes they don't, like Jose Ibarra. But, again, I'm not sure that starting to arrest shoplifters again is really the solution to, one guy kind of slipping through the cracks.
All right, let's turn to the sheriff's race now. So we have incumbent John Q. Williams facing challenger Tommy Dorsey. How do we feel about this race?
I think John Q is far and away the favorite of this one. I don't see how Dorsey could be admitted, because he's running in a Democratic primary. If this was a general election, then you have all the Republicans who could support someone who was a little more to the right. I'm not even sure if what Dorsey's political opinions are, but
I did see him speak at a Republican Party meeting at one point. Which, I mean, credit to him for reaching out to them, I mean, I have no issue with that whatsoever.
Yeah,
I mean, I do think Republicans would be supporting Dorsey, I would imagine, if for no other reason that he's not John Q. Williams, who is personally responsible for, letting murderers into this community, if you believe them. But are they going to cross over to a Democratic primary to vote for Dorsey?
I don't think so.
Probably not. I don't think so. Not in big numbers.
I think it would depend on what races there are in the Republican primary. What would they sacrifice?
That's a good point, because there's not a whole lot. There's not a whole lot going on in the Republican primary. So, I mean, they could. I mean, it would take kind of like an orchestrated effort, I think, to make that happen, and I haven't really seen that yet.
Right.
He's got a lot of signs out. He had yard signs out off the rip, before pretty much everybody.
Well, like I always say when someone points out, how many signs somebody has, signs don't vote.
True.
And I always caution people, just because somebody, Maura Zuniga.
Yeah, she had a lot of signs.
Had a whole ton of signs. And
she's probably still got signs.
Yeah, some of the signs are probably still out there somewhere.
But, I mean, you can have 5,000 signs, and that's like all the 5,000 people are going to vote for you, which is not very many. So,
and John Q has a lot he can run on. I think he greatly expanded mental health care resources for inmates. He has rehabilitation programs that he started with Shane Sims. It seems to me like he's done a good job.
Nothing occurs to me as to why you wouldn't just vote for John Q. Williams again. I don't have a reason right now. If somebody were to tell me one, then we could go from there. But right now, I just can't really think of anything that would make me want to throw him out, you know?
Right. He's been really active in the position. He has all these community outreach efforts.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's good to see, like, especially compared to the sheriff we had last time, who wasn't really all that active in the community as far as I could tell.
Yeah, it feels like in a Democratic primary, John Q wins out.
Yeah, he's strong in a Democratic primary.
Yeah. All right, now let's move to the sole congressional race that we'll have on the ballot. We have Lexi Doherty squaring off against Jessica Fore to be the Democratic nominee to face fake trucker Mike Collins in November. Chris, you recently did interviews with both Lexi and Jessica. So tell us a little bit about those candidates.
I think they're both very passionate. I think they're both willing to do the work, which is great to see. That's what we need in this district. If someone could possibly win it, theoretically, you'd have to do a ton of work. You have to be everywhere talking to voters. And I think both of them are willing to do it. I think both of them are very progressive. I don't know how much that helps them or hurts them maybe in this district, but I think they're great, both of them. I don't even know which one I'm going to vote for at this point. I wish we'd send both of them to Congress.
I mean, I'm sure they're both great. You know, I mean, it doesn't matter if they could be Jesus Christ and they would still lose to Mike Collins by 20 points. So, I mean, I'm glad somebody's out there doing the work, I guess, because I hate to see any races go uncontested. But I mean, this one is as much of a foregone conclusion as pretty much anything could be.
Yeah, it's a solidly red district.
Yeah. I think it will be more interesting if Jessica Fore were to get the nomination, because she's more combative, if that's the right word, for better or for worse. I think that's led her to make some mistakes before last time, but she is interested in political pugilism. And so she will try her hardest, if she becomes the nominee, to get up in Collins's business and try to make a show of it, while losing by 20 to 30 points.
And that'll probably be an advantage for her, because I think that's what people want these days. They want a fighter, you know, they want someone who's going to...
That's her brand.
Yeah. I mean, they don't want, you know, someone who's going to be, you know, kind of conciliatory and play well with others. They want someone who's going to scream and yell and jump up and down.
But she also has, like, connections in her church. I can't remember which denomination at this point.
I think she's Methodist or Presbyterian. One of them.
Okay.
Protestant.
So she has a lot of connections there from what she told me. So I think that's an advantage, to be able to talk to voters from kind of a religious perspective, like on issues like abortion, for example.
Sure.
So that's something in her favor. But then Lexi got into the race earlier, and she has a really good team behind her at this point. So I think that's an advantage for her. We'll see how it goes.
And I think she kick off her campaign in Winder too, which I thought was interesting.
Oh yeah, I believe so.
I don't know how many Democrats there are in Winder, but I mean, it may be kind of a strategy to try to round up enough Democrats in other parts of the district, you know, few and far between though they may be, to counteract maybe Jessica Fore's strength in Athens, where she's pretty well known. Jessica's pretty well known, I mean, from having run 2 years ago. Yeah,
I would imagine Lexi needs to get in the car and start driving to the other counties in the district.
Get down to Greensboro, some places like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, either way, it's definitely an uphill battle for whoever wins the primary.
So, Chris, you recently wrote a very good, long piece about buses in Athens and the prospect of keeping them fare-free. For folks who don't know, buses in Athens are free. You can go to a bus stop and just hop on one whenever you want. But yeah, tell us a little bit about what you learned.
So I went to a retreat, the commission retreat in January, and it was kind of a mixed opinions there about whether to keep the system fare-free. Now, staff like Athens Transit wants to keep it fare-free because they're, under new leadership now with Victor Pope as the interim director. I think the last transit director wasn't a big fan of not charging fares, but Victor seems to support it. So they want to keep it going for another year at least. Because the thing is that you would have to buy the fare boxes again, because the old fare boxes are really not good anymore. They were kind of towards the end of their life anyway before COVID hit. And I think at this point they would just buy a whole new batch of them. And they're actually pretty expensive. So that would cost about $1.6 million is what Victor told me. And if you add all of that up, and they last about 10 years. So that's about $160,000 just per year, just buying the fare boxes. And then you have to pay people to count the money. You have to, print tickets. Like all of that adds up to like almost $300,000. And we're only getting about $500,000 or $600,000 actually through the fare boxes. So it just kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, to not charge, to charge fares. Now we would get some money from UGA if we're able to do that. So in total, even if you add all that up, it's still about a 25% overhead, charging fares. Like you have to waste 25% of the money just to get that other 75%. And to me, it's just not worth it, especially when we're collecting money from, some of the poorest people in the county, who really need to be able to get around. And I think people have a right to mobility if we can reasonably provide that to them. So since it's not really that important for the funding structure, since we have T-SPLOST, we have federal dollars, so we don't need to charge fares. And since it's so inefficient, it reduces ridership. I don't really see the point in it. But some commissioners did want to bring it back. I think Avita Thornton and Dexter Fisher were the two kind of brought it up that they thought they should charge fares again. And so I just wanted to write this article because Dexter said, no operation can continue without income. And so that's the way kind of people view the transit system as like a struggling business that just doesn't have and that's not the way I view it at all. I view it as more like any other government department who's providing a necessary service for people. Like you don't necessarily, they're not expected to. Leisure Services does charge, user fees for some of their programs, but they're not expected to pay for all of their operations, based on that. And it would be incredibly expensive if they did, right? People couldn't afford to go to these programs. And like Transportation and Public Works, like they're not, charging user fees. They're not expected to. So I just don't think that. I think we should change the way we look at it and view it more as a public service, not like as a business.
Yeah, it was really helpful in your article. You had some helpful graphs to let us know how it is funded. Just because they're not taking fares in doesn't mean they're not getting revenue. It's just not through those means. Right.
Yeah. The amount we're getting in T-SPLOST just dwarfs the amount we're getting in fares. So it just isn't necessary when you're reducing the ridership and, taking, like I personally care about, doing what we can on a local level, as small as it is, to reduce wealth inequality. And this is one way we can do that. And when people have more money, that they tend to, spend that locally, especially the further down you are in the income ladder, the more you spend locally. So I think it could even help the economy, for example.
What was the fair price when we stopped charging?
It was $1.75.
$1.75.
Yeah. And the last time they raised it, they knew they weren't going to get much extra money from the people actually putting money into the machine. They raised it to get more money from UGA. Because there's this whole negotiation that happens between them every year.
Yeah, UGA used to pay the bulk ticket rate for students and faculty and staff. You would swipe your UGA card when you got on board, and then UGA would reimburse Athens Transit. But that's been replaced now. It's not even really necessary to get that money anymore because now they have figured out a way for UGA to combine its ridership numbers with Athens Transit, which UGA's ridership numbers like dwarf at. I think it's like 11 million riders a year or something. It actually, when you put them together, they're the second biggest transit system in the state of Georgia by a margin. So when you put those two together, now all of a sudden we can go to the feds and we can get extra money from, I think it's called
Stick, yes. Yeah. Small transit intensive cities.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the STIC program now we can get funding that's even more than what we were getting from UGA under the old system, and we just kind of split it between the two of us. There's some negotiations around that. Like I think, last year Athens Transit got the money, but then then Athens Transit agreed to take over a couple of the UGA lines to start operating them. And that was supposed to happen a while ago. I don't know why. Like I think it was the veterinary school and the health sciences campus routes they were supposed to take over, and they haven't done that yet, which is probably something I need to check on. But I would imagine it has to do with the shortage in riders, which Chris, you also wrote about.
Yeah, drivers. Yeah,
drivers. Excuse me. Yeah, and I agree with all the points you made about excuse me the benefits of not charging fares. But if you really want to boost ridership, what you've got to do is you've got to provide better service. And I think we have a great transit system for a city our size right now. Believe it or not, most places this size would not have anywhere near the kind of system we have. I think like Macon, for example, has like 4 lines, and we've got 12 or 13, I think. So,
yeah, especially in Georgia when we don't get any operational funding from the state, which is one of the very few states where that's the case.
But what we really need is you need the bus to come, every 15, 20 minutes. It can't come once an hour because people can't rely on it. If you miss the bus, you're going to be an hour late for work. So, you've got to have these shorter headways, more frequent buses, and you can't use the spoke system that they have now, where every bus just goes downtown, or you got to go downtown to get to 5 Points. You have to have more connections to get from one part of the county to the other, and not just like funnel everything through downtown.
And I think they're working on that.
Costs a lot of money, and fares could be a funding source for that. To do that, I would say bring back fares, but it's probably not enough to do all the things that I'm talking about.
Yeah, and they are working on changing the route structure, I think, with those transfer hubs that they've been talking about. I'm not sure when those are scheduled to be finished, but I think it's going to be a few years. But they're going to get a few hubs out.
Yeah, I think it's 2026 for the one on Atlanta Highway, I believe.
Yeah, that should help a lot, I think.
There's another one on the books over on the east side by the Walmart, I think, which will allow for, some of these inter-neighborhood connections that isn't just everything going downtown, right?
Okay. So smaller than the multimodal center, obviously, but some kind of like hub or node of the system. Okay. So I didn't know.
Bigger than a bus stop with a bench and smaller than the multimodal center, basically. Yeah. I think it's about $1 million project, I think.
Something like that. I'm not sure.
Which is being paid for by the folks who are doing the mall redevelopment. We're not even paying for it. So that was one of the things they threw in as part of the
perfect
deal.
Okay. Yeah, I do think, if you look at MARTA, the MARTA experiment in Atlanta, you have to, unfortunately, build out a system quite substantially with very frequent what am I saying? Routes or whatever, there has to be a frequency of buses or trains. It has to be usable before people use it.
Yeah.
And
unless you're just relying on it. But if you have a choice, if you're somebody who owns a car, you're making a choice.
Yes.
That's what you want to get people who have a choice to use the bus instead of just people who need to use the bus because they don't have another option. Then you have to make it convenient.
Right. I think, fare free does increase ridership. I do think it's mostly people who were paying, who were using it before. It's not choice riders. They're just using it more often because now they're a little bit more free to move around the county. They can they don't have to
think about, do I have $3.50 to make this trip?
Right. Yeah. If they're going to see a movie or, go to the park or something, they don't have to worry about it anymore. They can just go
see a movie. You have money to ride the bus. Come on now. You know how much movie tickets are these days?
I will say at times I've ridden the bus in the past or during the fare free era, it was, I don't ever have cash. So it was.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you have to have exact change.
Literally, who has
change,
quarters in 2024? Nobody has quarters.
So I don't know. If they do charge fares again, I hope they think of a better way to do it.
Yeah, that would. I mean, there are better ways, but I think those are even more expensive. Those machines, unfortunately.
I mean, a lot of systems now, you can pay with your phone. I mean, there are all different kinds of ways you can buy beforehand on your phone.
Sure.
They've got apps.
Yeah, but I think then we're talking about wasting even more of the money on expensive.
I mean,
stuff.
None of the stuff I'm talking about probably makes sense for Athens because we're probably just too small. But I mean, a lot of bigger cities are doing things like that where they're not fare free, but they're making it a lot easier. And there are a lot of cities that if they're charging fares, they have programs where if you make less than a certain amount of income, then you get a free card or something along those lines, or a discount, right? So, but again, that's probably making it overly complicated for a city the size of Athens,
And and I do think fares were a big burden for some people, like because we talk about T-SPLOS that or SPLOS like sometimes gets really criticized for being a regressive tax, and rightly, I suppose, but if you look at fares, like how much more expensive that is for someone, for someone like living in poverty, it's like about 10% of their income they could easily spend on fares or more in a year, which is, and SPLOST, even if you add SPLOST and T-SPLOS together, that's just at most, that'd be 2% of your income. So this really was a big burden for some people, I believe.
That does it for this episode. Join us next time for more on local elections, updates on what goes down at the next big voting session at City Hall, and what new laws were cooked up in the state legislature in Atlanta. And as always, be sure to subscribe to or follow AthCast wherever you listen to podcasts. See y'all next time.